Hello, I'm Kim Merrifield, and welcome to another episode of On the Table, the show that celebrates what's on your table. Today, we're giving another ingredient a whirl, or a twirl, I guess you could say. Whether you buy it fresh or dry, whether you like it sauced or stuffed, and no matter what you add to it, most of us can appreciate a warm, comforting plate of pasta. And what's there not to love about it? Pasta comes in countless varieties, each of a different shape, size, and regional origin, but each has its own special culinary niche. On this episode, we'll dip our toes in the water, not literally, of course, sift through some common cooking errors, and give form to a new understanding of the suppertime staple. But first, a disclaimer. The world of pasta is vast and incredibly diverse. From udon and soba to couscous and vermicelli, variations exist all over the world. Too many to cover in just one episode. That said, today's episode will mainly focus on Italian-style pasta. We will take a bite of some other examples another day. Now, for our appetizer. Pasta. Where do we begin? Probably not where you would think. What if I told you it all began in ancient Greece? Yes, Greece, the birthplace of philosophical rhetoric, political discourse, and phyllodo. And while Plato might not have invented the plate, the ancient Greeks played a part in creating the prototypical predecessor to modern-day pasta. It began as a dish called laganum, made of thin sheets of dough that were layered together with an assortment of savory fillings that resembled an early form of lasagna. Think about other Greek dishes like spanakopita and moussaka. These layered dishes likely stem back from laganum as well. This tradition was continued by the Romans, who created their own variations of the dish. As we move into the 9th century, a new development took place as a result of cultural exchange. Arab traders sailed across the Mediterranean to Sicily and brought with them a new form of early pasta. Unlike the Greek version, it was dried for preservation and cut into smaller strips that could be boiled in water when ready to serve. The influence from both of these cultures eventually merged into its own unique tradition that evolved over centuries and rooted itself in southern Italy. When we think about food, it's not about who can be credited with what. It's about shared traditions that carry forward and branch out across the world as populations shift. Think of it this way. Food is like language. It evolves with us, taking on new shapes and meanings as it goes. Languages borrow from each other. They mix together and divide, and eventually they morph into new languages. But they can still be traced back to a common root and a similar set of building blocks. And that's the cool thing about food. It's constantly being shared and reimagined, mixed and reinterpreted. Just like the words we read, hear, or pass on, food transcends our arbitrary borders and forms a bridge between all of us, inviting us to connect, inviting us to learn, inviting us to break down barriers. And although I haven't traveled very far in my life and aren't fluent in any other language but my mother tongue, I can still get a taste of the world through food. Learning its origins, its roots, its context, and through this, I've expanded much more than my palate. Now, for your main course this evening, I thought I would offer some pasta pairing advice and some tips from taking it from package to pot to plate. This isn't to give you a rule book to follow the next time you make some rigatoni, but rather some helpful suggestions that will make your tagliatelle taste terrific and take the fuss out of your fusilli. Let's treat you to that. Pasta is one of those easy, approachable meals that almost everybody knows how to cook. Just boil some water, throw it in the pot, strain, and serve. But while this process may seem pretty cut and dry, it leaves a lot of room for error. While pasta might be an easy weeknight dinner for most people to prepare at home, it's not always easy to get the taste and texture you're aiming for. Sometimes it turns out too soft, too watery, maybe even a little bland and sad. But with a few small adjustments to your cooking routine, you can get a restaurant-worthy experience right in the comfort of your own kitchen. First, always use a large enough pot. Even if you're only making 1 or 2 servings, those noodles need room to expand and cook evenly. Next, always add salt. A common rule of thumb you'll hear from chefs, and one that I often refer to as a guide, is that pasta water should taste as salty as the sea. No particular measurement, just eyeball it until it feels right and do it to your taste. More salt equals more flavor, and it's very hard to overdo it. And if it's too salty for your liking, it's easy to fix. Just pour out the salt water and dilute it with some plain water until you're happy with the salt to water ratio. Another common mistake some folks make with the pasta water is adding olive oil. Do not do this. It will not add any flavor to the finished product and will not prevent sticking no matter how hard you stir. Without an emulsifier, oil and water don't mix. So save any olive oil for drizzling directly on the pasta when it's finished. That way none goes to waste. Now we turn the dial and wait for it to boil, but don't watch it, then it won't. Just kidding. I know it can feel like an eternity for the water to come to temperature, but there are ways of speeding up the process. But first, let's get this out of the way. Cold water does not boil faster than warm. This is just an old wives' tale and a common misconception. Scientifically, the closer the water already is to boiling temperature, the faster it'll reach it. That said, I prefer to start as warm as possible. If your dinner's on a deadline, turn that dial all the way to high and put the lid on. Just keep a close watch that it doesn't boil over. Nobody wants to hear that sizzle. You can also rest a spoon, wooden or otherwise, over the top to help keep the water level under control. When it comes to portioning your dry pasta, I tend to just use the box as a guideline. Generally, about 2 or 3 ounces of dry pasta will make enough to serve one person, and from there you can adjust. Fresh pastas stay about the same size after cooking, so they are much easier to estimate. And now let's quickly talk about flour. Generally, most traditional pastas you'll find in the store or served in restaurants are made of durum wheat or semolina. These are the most popular and most readily available, but they may not suit everyone's needs or dietary preferences. But luckily, there are alternatives for those who are sensitive to refined grains or gluten, or for anybody looking for a healthier option or a different taste. Whole grain, gluten-free, higher protein, and higher fiber options are now becoming widely available, which means that whatever your nutritional needs or goals, there's a version out there that can help you meet them. I personally prefer to use legume-based pastas, made of chickpeas or lentils, to make it a complete and balanced meal. The extra fiber and protein helps me keep portions in check, and the complex carbs keep me feeling full and energized for much longer. Alternatives like these allow me to have my pasta and eat it too, while keeping my nutrition balanced and my portions under control. After all, if we want to live well, we must also eat well, and eating well means taking care of ourselves, nourishing ourselves both mentally and physically with what we put on our plates. In a future episode, we'll talk a little more about what that means. Back to that pot we left on the stove. It seems to be boiling now. We've measured out our pasta of choice, and now it's ready to cook. In most cases, about 8 to 10 minutes will do the trick. Any more than this, and there's a chance you could overcook it and make the texture just a little too soft. Better to drain it and rinse it while it's still in that chewy, al dente sweet spot. Carefully remove the pot from the stove top and pour it into a sieve or colander. No need to rinse. Rinsing would remove the coating of starch that allows sauces to stick, so simply drain away the pasta water. But I do recommend saving about a quarter to a half cup in the event you need to add it to your sauce. And when it comes to sauces, some are a better fit than others. Here's a helpful little chart of some pairings that can complement one another. And last but not least, add your pasta into the sauce. Doing so allows for an even coating, more adhesion, and a lot more visual appeal than pouring it directly over the top. It also makes it easier to store any leftovers you might have and consolidate dishes, since you won't need to transfer the sauce to a separate container or dirty the pasta cooking pot with more messy ingredients. You might already know this, but Italian meals often have 2 main courses. So, to suit the occasion, I've prepared another entree for you all tonight. We've filled our plates with pasta, and now it's time to get to the meat of things. It's time to talk tomato sauce, or gravy, or red sauce, or whatever you like to call it. While plenty of pasta dishes skip the red stuff in favor of a light coating of olive oil, a bright pesto, or a rich cream-based sauce, there's something nostalgic about a sweet marinara or a hearty bolognese. Just like every pasta shape, there's a time and a place for every sauce, and even the most adventurous or discerning of eaters among us can't resist the classics.
When you get a craving for nostalgia, sometimes that's all you want. That jarred, store-bought sauce tastes just like what your mother made. But sometimes you're in the mood for something made from scratch, something that takes time, a sauce that makes you want to clean your plate and come back for seconds. Let's talk about how we can create something like that for ourselves the next time the craving arises.
A good pasta sauce begins with your tomatoes. And as most seasoned cooks would tell you, a tomato is not a tomato. The variety matters. When selecting a tomato variety for your homemade sauce, here's a good rule of thumb. Avoid large tomatoes with high water content like beefsteak. These might look big and juicy, but the flavor, sadly, is not. But if you had to use them in a pinch, I'd recommend roasting them first to bring out some complexity. That said, we should aim to look for a tomato that is on the smaller side. Plum tomatoes work the best for the job, San Marzano if you can find them, but even cherry or grape tomatoes can do the trick. If you can find them fresh and on the vine, great. If you decide to use canned, you're already one step ahead. Just be sure to use less salt than you would for fresh. Canned tomatoes often come pre-salted. What do you do once you get them home? Do you just throw them in the pot and let them stew? No, not quite. There are still some crucial steps we need to take before we can set it simmering. These steps will help build flavor and make for a balanced and well-rounded sauce. First, before adding anything to the pot, you'll want to start heating up some olive oil. Extra virgin preferably. Wait for it to spread out across the bottom of the stock pot and appear shiny on the surface. That's how you know it's hot enough to begin to add your aromatics. Aromatics are the ingredients that add fragrant aromas and bold flavors to the dish. The traditional choices would be garlic, red pepper flakes, and maybe a little onion, but you're free to experiment with the amounts or add something a little unconventional if it suits your preferences. I like to use a good amount of garlic, some chili flakes for heat, and sometimes an anchovy or two. Yes, for all you tin fish skeptics out there, I did say anchovies. But there's a reason for that. Anchovies are packed with umami flavor. Super savory and salty, and when added to the hot oil, it will quickly begin to melt and dissolve into it, infusing these flavors throughout the entire dish. It might sound a little fishy, but I invite you to give it a try. It doesn't taste fishy at all, and it only enhances the overall flavor of the sauce. Anyway, let these aromatics sizzle until your kitchen starts smelling amazing, and then you're free to brown your meat if you're using it, or add vegetables if you like a heartier sauce. Onions and carrots can add a little sweetness and texture once they cook down, and after adding meat or vegetables, be sure to add a pinch or two of salt. This will not only add flavor, but help draw out some of the moisture. As you continue cooking, prep your tomatoes. And once the ingredients are beginning to brown and stick to the pan, you'll know it's time to deglaze. You can add some water, some broth, or even some wine if you want to. Broth will lend a little extra salinity, and wine will add depth and complexity. If you're planning on serving the meal with wine, I recommend using the same variety or something similar, and preferably one that pairs well with tomato, like a Chianti or a Zinfandel. After adding your liquid of choice, be sure to scrape the pan for any brown bits. These will also add to your final flavor. Next, add your tomatoes. Depending on your desired texture and cooking time, you could add them whole and as is, or you could remove the peels and slice them into smaller pieces. Add in a good amount of salt and a little water, pasta water if possible, to the pot and allow the tomatoes to soften. Stir as needed until the tomatoes are soft enough to squish. Get out a potato masher or whatever else you have on hand and squeeze the juice out of the tomatoes and break apart any peels. Turn the heat down to a simmer and let the tomatoes stew in this liquid until your sauce reaches the desired consistency. You can choose to cover it and let it cook for longer, or leave the lid off and let some of the water evaporate. It's all up to you and your dinner schedule. I say, if it looks smooth and thick enough to use, then it's ready to serve. Let your own judgment guide you, not a specific recipe. If you need to adjust anything, be it water, salt, heat, or time to suit your needs, then feel free. It's not one size fits all. Always feel free to experiment and find what works for you. Cooking should liberate you, not constrain you.
Cooking is not only a form of expression, it's an act of care and a way to connect. Food connects us to history, to culture, and to others too. Recently, I brought On the Table on the road and visited Boston's North End to do some research for this episode, and I got a first-hand look at not only the food, but the tight-knit community and all of its charm and vibrancy during the annual St. Anthony's Feast celebration. Consider this a sweet conclusion to our meal. Now for some food for thought. Pasta, when served on its own, is rather plain. It might be subtle, smooth, delicate, firm, or textured, but by itself, its qualities might be overlooked, underestimated, or possibly never noticed. In a sauce that's too thin, it might get watered down and lose its substance. Too thick, and it might break. We can't blame the pasta for that. Sometimes all it needs is to be put in a different sauce. One that supports its flavor, its texture, its nuance, and allows it to take up space on the plate. Once we serve it in a way that showcases the strengths of its shape and the depth of its taste, we find that there was nothing wrong with the pasta at all. It just hadn't found its niche yet. That's all for today's helping of On the Table. I hope this episode brought you some comfort and filled both your bowls and your souls. Thanks for watching, and remember, at my table, you're always welcome. You know, I had to cook these on the way out the door this morning. I think that's forced. I don't know if I want to keep that.